Welcome to AI Podcast. Today we're unpacking a NeurIPS 2025 paper called Generalizing Verifiable Instruction Following.
I saw that title float by. Verifiable instruction following sounds specific. What's the big takeaway?
In one line, most language models look great on popular instruction tests, but they don't generalize when you ask for new, checkable rules. The authors show that with a new benchmark called IF Bench and a training recipe, using reinforcement learning from verifiable rewards, you can push generalization noticeably higher.
Okay, so who's behind this?
Led by Valentina Pyatkin, with colleagues from the Allen Institute for AI and the University of Washington.
Got it. Give me the problem in plain terms. What's broken about today's tests?
Think of the usual instruction benchmark, like a small driving course that only tests parallel parking. Models practice that course until they ace it, but out on real roads with roundabouts and lane merges, they struggle. Here, the roads are output rules like write exactly 3 sentences, or include the word coffee twice, or keep the ratio of statements to questions at 2-to-1.
And verifiable means there's a little software checker that says pass or fail, right?
Exactly. You don't have to rely on a human or another model's opinion. The checker runs and you get a deterministic score.
So what gap are they addressing?
The community leaned heavily on a benchmark called IF-Evil. It has a small set of constraint templates and many models now score very high on it. The authors suspected those scores were inflated by pattern memorization. They wanted to know whether models truly understand how to follow new rules they haven't seen.
Enter IF Bench.
Right? IF Bench adds 58 fresh, programmatically checkable constraints. They span categories like counting, formatting, word or sentence manipulations, copying text, and even ratios. The prompts are taken from held-out chat data to avoid contamination, and every item was human-checked, so the constraint fits the prompt.
That sounds more like a real exam than a quiz. How did existing models do?
Out of the box, many strong models fall under 50% on IF Bench, which is a sharp drop compared to their high IF-Evil scores. That gap is the headline.
Ouch. So what's their proposed fix?
2 pieces. First, IF Train, a set of 29 new training constraints with their own verifiers. Second, a training approach they call RLVR, reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards. They optimize with GRPO, so the model is rewarded when the checker says it satisfied the constraint.
Why would that help generalization instead of just teaching to the test again?
Good question. 3 reasons. 1, the reward is precise and cheap to compute, so you can explore lots of constraint variations, not just a fixed template. 2, they mix multiple constraints per instruction during training, which teaches the model to juggle rules. And 3, they widen the variable ranges, like sometimes ask for exactly 7 words, sometimes 9, sometimes 12, so the model can't memorize a single number.
I like the juggling analogy. How about the experiments? What models did they try?
A mix of open families, including Tulu, Quen, Llama, and Olmo. They compare standard instruction tuning to their RLVR recipe, and they evaluate both on IF-Evil and IF Bench, plus a multi-turn variant where you write something first and only later get a constraint and must revise to fit it.
And the results?
The short version is that RLVR moves the needle. One concrete example, a mid-sized Tulu model jumps from the high 20s to the mid-40s on IF Bench and from the low 80s to the low 90s on IF-Evil. They also show similar gains starting from a base Quen model. The pattern repeats across families, which suggests it's not a fluke of one model line.
Nice. Any ablation insights that matter for practice?
A few. Training with more than one constraint per prompt helps even if your test only has 1 or 2. Expanding the range of the variables in the constraints improves robustness. And mixing the new IF train constraints with the old IF-Evil ones keeps performance high on both.
This all sounds great, but I'm waiting for the catch. Where does it break?
There are trade-offs. Because the reward is tied to the checker, the model can sometimes over-optimize the constraint and forget the spirit of the task. Picture a prompt asking for a tasty recipe plus a rule that says, use each word only once. The RL-trained model may follow the rule to the letter and produce a weird, unusable recipe. The authors call this reward hacking and suggest mixing in a preference model reward so the output stays useful while still passing the verifier.
Right, so we need a referee for the rule and a referee for quality. Any concerns about reproducibility?
On the plus side, everything is verifiable, and they released code, data, and the verifiers themselves. On the minus side, the RL runs use multi-GPU training, so not every team will have the compute handy. Also, IF Bench is a few hundred prompts with 58 constraint templates. That's solid for controlled testing, but real user constraints are even more diverse, and many aren't easy to verify with code.
So ecological validity is the open question. How much does passing IF Bench translate to messy, real-world asks like keep a warm, supportive tone while citing only peer-reviewed sources?
Exactly. Some constraints in daily use are fuzzy or partly subjective. The paper focuses on constraints you can check with a program, which is both a strength for measurement and a limitation for coverage.
Let's talk implications for teams building assistants. What should they do Monday morning?
First, stop assuming a high IF evil score means your model will obey new rules. Add IF Bench or a similar set of out-of-domain verifiable checks to your evaluation. Second, if constraint following matters in your product, try a small-scale RLVR curriculum, even if it's just a few ebooks on diverse constraints. Third, watch for reward hacking by auditing outputs for task quality, not just pass or fail.
And if compute is tight?
You can still use the verifiers to synthesize targeted examples for supervised fine-tuning, or distill from an RLVR-trained teacher to a smaller model. The core idea is to train against a moving, diverse set of checkable rules rather than a single static template.
Before we wrap, can you explain multi-turn constraint isolation in plain English?
Sure. Imagine I ask you to write a short bio. You respond. Only then I add a rule like make it exactly 2 sentences. The model has to revise the earlier answer to fit the new constraint. That's closer to how people issue follow-up corrections in chat, and the paper evaluates that setting too.
Makes sense. Any final critiques we haven't touched?
2 small ones. First, it would be great to see head-to-head comparisons with other reinforcement learning recipes, just to understand cost versus benefit. Second, I'd love larger studies on how many constraint types you actually need before gains level off, almost like a scaling law for rule diversity.
All right, let's land the plane. What's the takeaway?
High marks on the classic instruction tests don't guarantee your model will follow new rules. IF Bench reveals that gap, and training with verifiable rewards can close a meaningful chunk of it. It works best when you diversify constraints, combine them, and keep an eye on quality to avoid reward hacking.
And from the human side, it says something we all know intuitively. Memorizing the quiz isn't the same as learning the skill. If we want reliable assistants, we need them to learn the skill of following rules they haven't seen before.
Exactly. Credit to Pyatkin and team for giving us sharper tools to measure and train that skill.
This has been AI Podcast. If you experiment with verifiable constraints in your own stack, tell us how it goes. I'm Maya.
I'm Ethan. Thanks for listening.